Hello, everyone. I think it's all working now. So what we're going to do, we'll have a quick look at the markets ahead of the non-farm payroll release at 1:30 today. So in about 15 minutes, just a quick look at the major stuff, see what's happening. I mean, a lot has happened this week with the interest rate decision for the pound being one of the major ones, and US earnings season continuing. But before we get into that, let me just bring up the risk warning, and then I'll talk a bit about the payrolls. We'll look at some stats as to why these numbers are important. It's got the potential to affect everything, because it's the US unemployment number, traditionally released the first Friday of the month, and so it can affect. Clearly, FX is the obvious one to watch, the various foreign exchange markets, but also the likes of gold, of course, because it's quoted against the US dollar. Crude oil, the impact that the numbers could have on the wider economy, stock markets, of course. So all of this sort of stuff. Okay, so that all happens in about 11 minutes time. Let's just go through some of the details if this is all new to you. So it's a major monthly economic release, usually announced on the first Friday of the month, or if the previous month has been a short one, it'll sometimes, maybe a couple of times a year, get pushed to the second Friday. It's US unemployment data. It's probably the major bit of data we get every month from the US, often used as a barometer for the health of the US economy. How many jobs were added in the last month. So today we're looking at how many jobs were added in July, and also the overall unemployment rate. And then, so the expectations for today, it's all about how the number comes in compared to what the market expects. As I'm sure you're aware, if you watch markets, there are plenty of people who push out commentary on markets, and there's a broader market expectation as to whether interest rates are going to go up, whether Apple's going to beat earnings, and what the US job situation is. So today, expectations are running around, I think, plus 190,000 jobs to have been added to the US economy in July. So that's the number to keep in our heads, whether it's going to massively beat it, massively come in underneath, or just be pretty much plus 190,000. That's the number to watch for at 1:30 UK time. And I thought I'd just put up this picture, this chart of how it's done historically. So here we go, around about 200. So this is what we're expecting today. And you see that's been fairly constant for this year, with a big month there. But last month, just above it. So that's the sort of number that we're expecting for it to come in this week. Let me just reply to that. Okay, so let's see. Let's take a look at the markets. I'm going to use our web platform that's in beta at the moment, but it goes live next week. So the big week has been for the pound this week. I thought we'd take a look at the bigger picture for pound US dollar, going back to those April highs. So back in April, May, the market was disappointed that we didn't see an interest rate rise from the Bank of England. And we've seen, and we've seen this massive reversal, from about the 144 area down as low as 130. And this is a big one to watch, because on the pound, we're back down to levels that proved to be pretty pivotal in October, November last year, sort of 129.50, 130. At the moment, it's trading just above the 130 mark. So it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction is from those numbers at 130, what the market actually does here. So let's see what happens. So that's pound US dollar. If we break below 129.50, not just this afternoon, but I think going into next week, it's a major level to break for the pound, and I think it does suggest we could see a lot more weakness to come. So we'll keep an eye on that. Euro dollar is interesting as well. It's interesting because it's been so boring. It's like, the last, what is it now? The last 3 months. Is it 3 months? No, 2.5 months. It's been really trapped with 115. The base for the euro, and then sort of 118.50 capping any rallies. And over the last few days, it's sold off again, and we're back down to the mid 115. So if we're going to repeat the sort of sideways market that we've seen over the last few months, you'd expect buyers to come back in down here and lift the euro up over the next couple of weeks back up to 118. So I think it's a really interesting one to watch again. Let's see what happens today. Maybe if we get a massive reaction, we could see that 115 level cracked. Maybe that's expecting a bit too much, but let's see what these numbers look like in about 7 minutes time. And stock market's really been in focus over the last week because, of course, we've had lots of earnings announcements. We had Facebook being quite downbeat on its outlook for the next quarter because of the money it's investing in security. So that share price is off 20%. We've seen Netflix a bit weaker. But Apple, again, as I'm sure you're all aware, has become the first $1 trillion company. So that happened, I think, yesterday. So Apple's numbers, let's just take a quick look at Apple, actually. Apple's numbers came in, and let's have a look at the chart. There we go. Look at that. So the Apple price pushed above $200 this week. So the numbers, I think, slightly better than expected. Incredible numbers as usual for Apple. So all-time highs for the share price and $1 trillion company. So, but we have seen some pressure on stock markets this week because of the tech sell-off. But this is the S&P 500. This is the broader US stock market. And you can see it's not a million miles away from those all-time highs we saw in January of this year before markets fell off a cliff. So I think despite the volatility and despite it making great headlines about what goes, about Facebook dropping 20%, it's not had that big an impact on the wider market. And it definitely doesn't change that medium-term trend. There's a video that's gone up today just looking at stock markets and Facebook and Netflix and Apple in a bit more detail. So you can see that on our YouTube channel. And then maybe finally, let's take a look at crude oil. Crude oil has had since last June an incredible run. It's gone from $42 a barrel up as high as 73 recently. It's struggled to make much progress in the 70s, but that trend is clearly still up from those lows. Whenever it sells off, we see buyers come back in. So I think the big levels to watch for crude run from about $63 a barrel. So the old lows from the middle of June to 66. So 63 to 66, big support for the price of crude oil. It gets knocked back down there, but the buyers come back in. I'm surprised actually that the strength that we've seen in crude hasn't had a bigger impact on the world economy just yet. Clearly, because if the price of fuel goes up, it normally does have an impact, but it feels like it's almost done it by stealth. A 70% rise over last year with not much in the way of wider comment, I don't think. So it is interesting up here. So again, it's another one to watch to see how it reacts. So we've got about 4 or 5 minutes until the number comes out. Let's just look at a couple of other things. Gold's an interesting market anyway. We do a weekly video on gold and oil. And this is another one where we've seen a big decline. So the story in FX for the last sort of 3 to 4 months has been about a comeback for the US dollar. So we've seen the US dollar gain ground against plenty of other markets. And gold is one example. Back in, April this year, we saw the price of gold sort of 1350, 1360 area, but it couldn't really make much progress. And at the moment, yesterday, it slipped to its lowest levels since, when is it? It's pretty much a year ago, isn't it? So we're back to 12-month lows on gold. And I think it's another one that's interesting down here. We've seen this massive decline. What's it moved now? Something like 10%, I suppose, in the last few months. But we're back to an area that had proved to be something of a turning point for the price of gold. So I think this whole 1190 to 1200 zone is a really big one to watch for gold, to see if we see these buyers come back in. Clearly for now, the trend is still down, so I wouldn't be in a hurry to sort of pile in and buy myself just yet. But I think this whole 1200 zone is one to watch. Let's flip it back to the currencies. Maybe we'll keep an eye, probably the ones to watch usually, pound against the dollar and euro dollar. That's how we'll tend to see pretty reactions. You can see how crazy it got yesterday on the interest rate announcement. So we saw it was widely expected, the 0.25% interest rate increase by the Bank of England. So we saw it surge on the news and then sell off into the afternoon. It's quite a big turnaround, selling off. So a big range. What was it? About 150-point range yesterday. So let's see what happens. It's drifted a bit lower today. So that's pound US dollar and euro dollar. Let's flip it over to a 5-minute chart just to keep an eye on that. When it comes to the trading the payrolls, it's difficult, I think, because you see, the number will come out. You would often get a knee-jerk reaction from the market. And I think, one rule of thumb that some people would say is that often the first move is the wrong move. So if we saw maybe the euro jump sharply up, you'll often see those sort of gains given back as the afternoon goes on. So I don't think there's a perfect way of trading the payrolls, but I think one idea is not to do anything straight away. Let's see how the market reacts initially, and see if that trend ends up being sustainable. Because often, as the day goes on, the market can move in completely the other direction. So we've got a couple of minutes until it happens. So when the number comes out, I'll say what the number is. Keep an eye on the markets for a few minutes. Then we'll wrap things up, and then I'd say just keep an eye on things as the day goes on to see what happens. So the number that we're expecting is plus 190,000. You'd expect things to go pretty quiet for now. Let me try and find out exactly what the time is. Okay, we've got about 2.5 minutes until it comes. And I think levels to watch, clearly levels to watch, are the highs and lows ahead of the announcement. So for euro, we traded as low 8 o'clock this morning, around about 115.60, and being as high as 116.10. So we've had a 50-point range in euro dollar. So I think there would be the first levels to watch if we get a sharp move from the market. Pound US dollar, how low has it been today? 129.75 and as high as 130.40. So a 65-ish range for the pound against the dollar. And if we just flick it over to the dailies, here we go. You can see sort of how important this old 129.50 level is from earlier this month. From July. So from a couple of weeks ago, those 129.50 lows were pretty major. So let's just go back to the euro and wait to see if the news comes out. So like I said, this is our new platform. So if you're a client of ours and you haven't had access to the beta, then this will be launched, I think on Monday next week. I think it's going live to everybody. Okay, we've got, in a second, let's see, just over a minute and a half. Just a quick look at the price of gold. I don't want to miss this. I don't want to keep talking over it and miss the announcement completely. And you'll often see, on a day like this, market's pretty quiet. A major news announcement, again, as a general rule of thumb, if there's major news coming out, like on Friday night, we had the US interest rate decision, no changes expected there. But you'll often see markets almost, marking time, waiting to get the announcement out of the way, and then seeing how things react afterwards. Okay, so we've got about 50 seconds until it happens now. So we have seen the euro sell off a little bit. This is the pound. We've seen the pound drift, a little bit lower, but in the great scheme of things, it's not much. So we've drifted off about 20 points in the last couple of hours or so. But it's been, fairly directionless and fairly calm, just waiting for this number to come out. So we've got just over 20 seconds now. So again, the expectation is for plus 190,000. It's all about how much it misses or hits that buy. There are lots of places you can look at this. I mean, a good source of stuff around non-farm payrolls is Twitter. I think if you're on Twitter, having a streaming feed for that sort of thing can help. Right, we've got a few seconds. So here we go. Let's what we're looking at, pound US dollar. Let's zoom it up a bit and see what happens. Okay, so we've seen it jump. What's that? Jumping about 10 points there. Okay, plus 157,000. That was the number. So it's come in slightly worse than expected. The unemployment rate edges down to 3.9%. And you can see the move. Let's flip this over to a 1 minute chart. You can see just how often, how crazy the move is on this. We had the market jump up about 20 points, and now it's come back down again, and it will probably be all over the place for a few minutes. So we do have an element of the headless chickens going on when it comes to these sort of announcements. So 157,000 was the number of jobs added in July versus expectations of 190,000. So it's missed, but it's not the worst thing in the world. It remains to be seen whether the rest of the day ends up being a non-event for that. But so far, maybe as expected, because we're seeing a poorer number than we thought. We're seeing a bit of dollar weakness. Clearly when we see the pound going up, as in this example, the pound's going up and the US dollar's going down. Let's just have a quick flick around some of the other markets. We'll make it a really short-term chart just so we can see the move. So that's the move in euro dollar. It's still going up. So it was trading around about, what, 115.85-ish before the number. It's 116.05 now. So it's up 20 points or so, pushing up towards the highs of the day. We'll see if it can manage to crack that. The gold price, what's gold doing? Again, you'd expect a bit of a dollar weakness, would usually mean, oh, there we go, a move higher in gold. So gold's jumped only about $3 from about $12.12 an ounce before the announcement to 12.15-ish. Now, crude oil, what would you think? You'd guess maybe that we've seen it. Let's see, let's flip it over to a minute chart. There we go. A little bit of pop higher in crude, but not much. You know, again, in a great scheme of things, the announcement came out about here. It was at $68, and it's at $68.22 at the moment, so nothing too crazy. And stock markets, let's have a quick look at the S&P, because, of course, even though the official US Open is in an hour's time, so 2:30 UK time, 9:30 New York time, stock indices trade 24 hours. And as expected, a bit weaker. You know, if the economy isn't looking maybe quite as great as we thought based on those payrolls, you'd expect a bit of a drift lower in stock markets, and that's what we've seen. But as usual, you know, most of the drama and the volatility has played out in the FX market. So this is pound US dollars coming back now, coming back from those highs. You know, it wouldn't be surprising if we went back to where we were before the number came out. So slightly disappointing, a slight miss, but not exactly the end of the world. And there's euro dollar giving back some of those gains. So let's see what happens the rest of the afternoon when everyone's got a chance to digest what these numbers mean, and do we see a bit more direction. We'll wrap things up there as usual. You got any questions afterwards, you can drop me an email. If I can find my PowerPoint, there we go. You can drop me an email on david.jones@capital.com. And to find out more about Capital.com, download a demo, open an account, all that sort of stuff, just go to the website, Capital.com. Like I said, we put a lot of content on our YouTube page. We look at cryptocurrencies, traditional FX, stock indices, gold, oil, all that sort of stuff. So there's lots of content there. So head over to YouTube and look at Capital.com, and it's all there. Okay, thanks for coming along. Let's see what the rest of the afternoon's like, and I will wrap things up there and let you get on with your Friday.